Hello guys, today inshallah we're going to continue what we started last time. We started talking about SCOR model, supply chain operation reference. It's a reference used to represent processes within supply chain, to describe these processes, describe how to measure the performance of these processes, what should be done in each process, what is the input for that process, what's the output for this process. And finally, if you want to hire somebody to do this process, what requirements should be in that candidate. And we started talking about what type of processes that any supply chain member can be doing. So if you have a look here at this company, here is your company, and here is a supplier, external supplier, and here is a supplier of suppliers. What we do in each member of the supply chain is we buy things from suppliers. So we call this source activity. And then we transform this into some sort of a product. So we do a make product, a make process. Then we deliver the final product to our customer. So we do a delivery. While doing the delivery or doing the sourcing, there may be some bad items or items that need to be reworked or non-conforming parts. For these parts, they need to be returned back. So we have a return process. And this return process is divided into two parts actually. Here's a return source, so return delivered item. So this is return delivered. And there is another type, this one, which is return sourced items. And then we have a planning activity, and this planning activity will be later related to, are you planning to the entire supply chain, or are you planning for the sourcing activity, or are you planning for the making activity? Are you planning for the delivering activity, or are you planning for the returning activity? So we have 5 types of the planning. So now we know that we have 5 main or basic management processes in a supply chain: planning, sourcing, making, delivering, and returning the product. In this slide, we will go over each process. We will describe this process and what we will give you some example on what to expect in each of these processes. Now for the planning activity, if you have a look at the planning activity here, it's the process that balance aggregate plan. It's a process that balance aggregate plan or aggregate demand and supply to develop a course of action which best meets sourcing, production, and delivery requirements. In other words, we have a demand here and we have a supply. We can provide certain amount or certain number of processed products. So let's say we have a demand of 150 and we have a supply of 100. We can produce 100. So we need to balance between these two. How can we, using the small resources or the small amount of resources, to be able to satisfy the demand? So in that case, we find that we need to balance resources with requirements. In order to produce, we have some resources like manpower, machines, material, and in order to produce this 150, we need some requirement. We need 5 workers, for example, and we have 4 workers. How can we deal with this situation? That's a planning activity. Are you going to work extra time, overtime? Are you going to do some subcontracting? So you're going to do some certain actions. So you're planning what action will be used to satisfy the gap in demand and supply. Establish, communicate plans for the whole supply chain. we know that one of the most important things of drivers in a supply chain is the information. So we have a plan. We must communicate this plan to the entire supply chain. So we need to pass information to different parties within the supply chain to know whether they will have an increase in the demand, an increase in the resources, a decrease in the demand, decrease in the resources. So we need to share some information. So this is the planning activity. So it's a balancing requirement with the resources. Sourcing activity or process, it's the processes that procure goods and services to meet planned or actual demand. The demand is divided into two types, either actual, like if you're going to buy an airplane, we produce according to the demand. So this is an actual demand. If you buy an airplane, we will tell you that we will deliver it in 1 year, 2 years. But if you buy bread, for example, it should be available. So we produce the bread based on forecast. So the demand is either planned or actual. In other words, forecast, or we have an actual demand. In order to do either of them, we need to procure material. So that's the sourcing activity. So sourcing activity is concerned with procuring and buying the goods and or services in order to do the actual production. An actual production can be based on actual orders or anticipated orders. So among the sourcing activity, we need scheduled deliveries. When are we going to receive the product? When are we going to verify this is the correct product? When we are going to transfer this product into the warehouse and accept these products. The third one is a make activity. And making activity is the process concerned with the transformation of the raw material or the sourced material to a finished state to meet planned or actual demand. So we have an actual demand or a planned demand. Based on that demand, we need, for example, 3 items to be ready next week, for example. So we need to transform the raw material in order for the product to be ready next week. So in the making process, we need some scheduling. For example, when are you going to start to bring the raw material? When are you going to start to produce the first step? When are you going to package the product? When are you going? So we need to do a scheduling process here in order to reach or to meet the planned or actual demand according to the schedule. After you produce the product, you need to deliver the product. So delivering is the process that provides finished goods and services to meet planned or actual demand, typically including order management, transportation management, and distribution management. So basically, it's the logistics part. We need to manage the orders, and when they are ready, we need to transport them. And when we transport them, we need to know how we're going to distribute them among the supply chain. So examples here of the activities that are included in the delivery activity: warehouse management, from receiving, picking, to loading and shipping the product. And you know the difference between warehousing activity and inventory management activity. Warehousing activity is to deal and to handle, stack, retrieve products from the warehouse, store and retrieve. So warehouse management, from receiving the parts, picking the product from the warehouse to the loading area or the shipping area. So when we receive the product, we need to stack them in the warehouse. And after we finish, we need to retrieve them back from the warehouse and put them or load them to the car or the vehicle. Return. It's the process associated with returning or receiving returned products. It's managing the returns. So when we receive a product, it doesn't have to be a bad product. It could be a good product, but the customer doesn't like the product. He wants to return it back. So in this case, we need to manage the return business rule. What is the rule? Are you going to deliver it to the nearest branch, or are we going to collect them in each branch and then deliver them to a certain location for recycling? Or are we going to tell the customer just to dispose them and we'll send you another one? So this is managing the business return rules. Model is divided into two main parts. One of the two parts is dealing with processes, and the other one is dealing with metrics. Metrics is a way to measure the performance of the supply chain. In this lecture so far, we've been dealing with the processes, and we divided these processes into 5 main processes. So we're doing either planning activity, plan, source, make, deliver, and return. These are the 5 main categories of any process. So if you're doing any process within the supply chain, it can be classified as one of these processes. So let's say that you're producing a product. This is a make product. You're buying something. It's a sourcing product. We're doing some customer relationship management. It's a delivering activity. We're doing some sourcing relationship, also supplier relationship management. It's a sourcing activity. So anything can be classified into one of these activities. So that's why we call this as level 1. So any process that you're doing can be classified into one of these 5 activities, or 5 processes. And then each of these can be further classified into subcategories. For example, the sourcing. The sourcing could be sourcing stocked items, or sourcing to order item. And there's other items as well. So this is number 1, number 2, number 3. We have other things that in the scope references. So from here, if we're buying, for example, we're producing bread, so we need to buy wheat or flour. We need to buy flour. So we ask ourselves, buying flour, is it planning, sourcing, making, delivery, or return activity? It's a sourcing activity. Then, is the flour made according to planned forecast, or is it made to order? The flour is made to stock. It's already stocked items. So it's an S1. So by saying S1, we mean it's a sourcing activity, and within the sourcing activity, it's the first type of the sourcing activity. So that's why we call this level 2. And then the process of buying flour itself is divided into, when we go deep here, it's divided into, for example, we look for suppliers, and then we select a supplier. We buy the product. The product is, for example, delivered or transferred. So we have here steps. So the process of buying the flour, it's not just a single process. It's divided into sub-processes. So this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So this is called level 3. So level 3 contains the details of level 2. And level 2 is which type of sourcing are you looking for. If you take another example, let's take an example of some customers buying our product, and we're manufacturing airplanes. So what we're doing here is we're delivering the product. The customer already orders or ordered a product, and we're delivering the product. Because we're producing planes, it's produced to order. So this is D, level 1 is D. Inside level 1 it's type 2, to order items. And then if you have a look inside the SCOR model, this delivery process is divided into verify the item, send the item. So it's divided into several steps. We put a point here, and then we refer to different steps. So when we say D2.3, it means it's the third step in the to order part of the delivery. So we open the part for the delivery. We look for number 2, which is deliver to order, and then there are several steps. We're referring to step number 3. To understand more the details of the process classification inside the SCOR model, we can have a look at this table. Once again, let's say that we're buying flour to produce bread. So the first thing is to classify this activity. So this is called top level, or the process type. The process of buying flour. Is it a planning activity, sourcing, making, delivering, or return? So basically it's a sourcing activity. That's why you call this level 1. That's an S activity. So level 1 here defines the scope and content for the supply chain operation reference model. In other words, what is the scope of the process? The scope of this process is to deal with sourcing activity, to buying. Then we have what is called configuration level. Inside the sourcing could be sourcing for products that are already ready, like the flour. The flour is already available, you can just go ahead and buy it. Or it is made according to your order. For example, planes, you order the plane and you wait for the plane to be manufactured. Or it could be engineered to order. So if you need to do order the product and then provide some information about the design, and then we design the product and then we manufacture the product. So we have several classifications. In our case, buying flour is the configuration or the process category of the configuration of buying stocked items. This is called number 2. So S2 here means it's a stocked item. So this is called configured to order item. Number 1 is ready and available products, which are stocked items, which are called stocked items as well. So number 1 is stocked items, number 2 configured to order item, number 3 engineered to order items, In other words, which configuration are you aiming at? Which sourcing? Because basically each one of these has totally different way of managing the process. For example, if you buy stocked items, then you need to buy large quantities. It's already available. The lead time is small. If you buy to order items, then the lead time is a little bit larger, and you can buy small amount. You don't have to buy a lot of items. So these are totally different ways of managing the delivering process or the supplying process. Now, if you go into the further details of this process, it's further divided into what is called process element. What are the elements of this process? It's a decomposition of the process. What does this process compose of? So, for example, if we're doing S2, we need to, for example, schedule deliveries, and then we need to transfer the product, and then we need to verify the product. So these are the elements of this process. This is S2, which is basically sourcing to order items. It's further classified into step number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And if you have a look at number 1, 2, and 3, it's not detailed. It's saying scheduled deliveries. It doesn't tell you how to schedule the deliveries. So level 3 here doesn't tell you how to schedule the deliveries. It just tells you that you need to schedule the deliveries. So it gives you the element of the definition, the element of the information needed, what information should be needed, how to measure the performance of these metrics. It gives you the details of this element. Now each of these elements can be further divided into actual steps, but SCOR doesn't cover these steps. For example, if you need to schedule the deliveries, then you need to know some sort of how to schedule things, how to do scheduling. So SCOR doesn't cover the details of level 4 and level 5. So this is beyond the context of the aim of the SCOR model. So the SCOR model is concerned with the main activity or the scope, and then within the scope it's which type configuration, and then it gives you what are the main elements of this process, but it leaves the decision to you how to execute these elements. It doesn't give you the details of how to execute these elements. It just guides you how you should be able to do this thing. So far we have been talking about the process part of the SCOR. The second part of the SCOR is called the metrics. It's based on measuring the performance of the supply chain, so it's a performance part. It's a little bit different from the classification of the processes. The main difference is both of them are actually divided into 3 levels, but the 3 levels are totally different. So for example, metrics, let's say that we want to be fast. The supply chain, we want our supply chain to focus on responsiveness. So the SCOR model will give you level 1, some measurements to make sure that you're fast. For example, this measurement is called order fulfillment lead time. So this is called level 1. In order to measure the performance of the responsiveness, you need to measure order fulfillment lead time. Now suppose that you want to be a little bit advanced than other companies. So you're not concerned with the overall performance, you also concerned with the details of this performance. So for example, order fulfillment lead time, in order to be good in the time taken to fulfill an order, you need the order to arrive on time. Delivery on time. And you need to measure whether it was complete or not. And you need to measure whether the documentation was correct or not. In other words, this is the details of order fulfillment lead time. So in order not to be deceived by just the order fulfillment lead time, let's say it's within 1 month and you deliver within 1 month. However, every time you deliver it, the documentation is not accurate. So we want to go further into the details of this delivery. So this is called level 2. So level 2 here gives you more information or more details about the performance. If you compare this to the processes, level 1 gives you a scope of the process and then which type of the process. In the metrics, level 1 gives you what to measure as an overall performance. And then for each of these measurements, order fulfillment lead time of level 1, it's further divided into some other metrics. It's the details of these metrics. In order to arrive in 1 month, it needs to arrive in the correct time. The quantity needs to be correct, the documentation needs to be correct, and the product needs to be in a good state, for example. So it gives you the details of this one. And if you want to be superior, if you want to be number 1 in this dimension, in the responsiveness, so if it's something strategic for you, you want to go further into the details of level 3. So each one of these needs to be divided into the metrics of the level 3, which are the details of level 3. So level 1 is an overall performance, level 2 is the details of level 1 performance, and then level 3, it's the details of each one of these one. This is a quick indication or quick explanation of what to expect in the SCOR model for the performance part. However, we have a dedicated lecture for this part. Once again here, if you want to measure the performance, you need first to identify what are you targeting. Do you want to be fast responsiveness, or do you want the supply chain to be reliable, or do you want the supply chain to be flexible? Do you want the cost to be minimum? Do you want the assets used to be minimum? So you have a certain goal. You cannot target all of these goals. You need to select among these goals. And once again, this is concerned with the performance part. It's not concerned with the process part so far. But there will be a link later. If you have a look here, the supply chain can compete on one of these 5 categories. So for example, if you want to compete on the responsiveness, then you need to measure level 1 order fulfillment lead time. If you want to compete on the cost, then your level 1 is to measure the total supply chain management cost, the cost of goods sold, the value added productivity, and the warranty cost or return processing cost. These are 4 items you need to measure. So in that case, we need first to identify which target you're going to select to compete on. And then we find what is the equivalent level 1 metrics. Don't forget these 5 because these 5 will be used later in the lecture today. We're still talking about the metrics. So levels of the metrics. It's the same like the SCOR's 3 levels. However, they are totally different levels. Level 1 metrics are primary high-level measures that may cross multiple SCOR processes. Unlike in the process, when I say level 1, it means it's a scoring activity. That's it. But level 1 metrics, for example, order fulfillment lead time, it occurs in several processes. So it's not related. Level 1 metrics is not related to level 1 processes. There is no direct relation. It can be in S1, it can be in D2, it can be in many other processes. So they don't necessarily relate to SCOR 1 process. So for example, if you take order fulfillment lead time, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's related to one of level 1 in the processes: process, plan, source, make, deliver, or return. There is hierarchy among the metrics in different levels. As I told you, level 1 is further divided into level 2, and level 2 is further divided into level 3. So in order to find level 1 metrics, you need to measure level 2, for example. And level 2 contains the details of level 1. So if you want to get more details, if you want to be just good, measure the performance of level 1. If you want to be better, measure the performance of level 1 and 2. If you want to be best, measure the performance of 1, 2, and level 3. Back to the processes once again. We know that the processes are divided into level 1, which is SP, whatever. Okay, so P, for example, P. And then we have S, and then we have M, D, return. Okay. Now, when you further divide this into level 2, we have different types for level 2. Level 2 can be classified into planning activity, executing activity, enabling activity. So, for example, if you are preparing something or you're arranging the sourcing part, so you're doing some planning for source. So we call here that this is a planning activity, but planning related to sourcing. That's why P is divided into 5 things. P1 is the planning for the supply chain. B2 is the planning for sourcing. B3 is planning for make. B4 is planning for deliver. P5 is planning for return. So level 2 here is actually a planning activity. So planning here is divided into 5 level 2 activities. All of these are level 2, but it's related for the planning activity. Now, if you have a look at SMDR, all of these are executing activity. So it's further divided into stocked or to order or engineer to order. So in other case, when we say S2, this is the second type of the sourcing. It's actually an execution because we're executing sourcing. But when we say P2, it's a planning for sourcing. So level 2 here is a planning activity. So it's either a planning activity or executing activity. There is a third type. When we do S, sometimes we need some information, for example, our IT system. So we call this enabler activity, ES. It's something that helps the sourcing activity. So we have three types of level 2 activities. It's either a planning activity, so anything here under the planning is a planning activity, or is it an execution activity. It means level 2 of the source, make, deliver, return. It's actually doing the activity, so it's called execution. Or it's something that helps any of the above. It's called an enabler activity. So have a look at this table here. It says that planning, here is the type of the process, and here are the SCOR processes: plan, source, make, deliver, return. All of these are divided into planning activity, execution activity, enabling activity. So when you plan for the entire supply chain, plan for plan. This is P1. So this is plan for the entire supply chain, for all activities of the supply chain. If you are doing sourcing and you're planning for sourcing, it's P2. So P2 is planning sourcing. If you're doing making and you're doing, here is making, and you plan for the making, it's P3. And the same for the others. Now have a look at the execution part. It's where we actually do the process. There is nothing called plan execution here, because planning is a planning. There is no execution. But for SMD and return, for all of these here, there are different types here. So we're either doing sourcing to make, sourcing to deliver, sourcing engineer to order. So have a look here: source stocked items, source engineer to order item, source make to order item. S1, 2, and 3. In the make, it's the same: stocked item to order item, engineer to order. Deliver, it's stocked item, make to order, engineer, and then we have something called retail. It's like supermarket, you're delivering from the supermarkets, and so on. So basically, if you have this table, you can get everything you need. For example, we are planning to buy from, we're planning to produce products in May. So it's make, and it's a plan activity. So this is P3. We're producing products that are stored in our warehouse until they are ordered. So this is a make, and this is execution. So it's M1 to 3. Back to M1 to 3 here. To stock, to order, engineer to order. We store them until we receive orders. So this is M1. And so on. We're delivering product, and these products are made custom according to the order, make to order. So it's a deliver part. We're doing execution for the delivery. So we're doing D1 to 4. Back to D1 to 4 here. We're doing make to order item, so it's D2. Now if you have a look at the entire model for level 2 so far, we have either planning activities, executing activities here, and then we have something that helps them, enablers. Now, the planning is divided into plan supply chain, plan source, make, deliver, return. So if you're doing any planning activity, it's either classified as planning for the entire supply chain. It's like planning at the headquarters for all the branches. Planning sourcing, it's planning for just one activity plan to procure the product. Plan make, it's a planning for the production only. Plan deliver, it's the planning for the delivery process for selling the product. Plan return, it's the plan for returning the products. And then the execution, it's either source, so source stocked items, source to order items, source engineer to order. Make stocked items, make to order items, make engineer to order. Deliver stocked to order, engineer to order, and then deliver a retail. And then we have return. Return either return source or return deliver. Now have a look here. That's a page from the SCOR model. Let's say that we're buying a product. We go to the definition of buying. It looks like it's a sourcing. We open the page for sourcing. We'll find that we have S1, S2, S3, definition of what's S1, S2, S3. Then it will ask you, are you sourcing stocked items or to order items or engineer to order items? For example, we're buying flour, that's stocked item. So we open the page for S1. We'll find that this is called source stocked product. If you're not sure what's source stocked product, here is the definition. Procurement, delivery, receipt, and transfer of raw material, sub-assemblies, product, or services. If you need to measure the performance, if you recall that we had 5 different competitive edges. Now we select one of them. If you want to measure the reliability, it gives you how to measure the reliability of this step. It's not how to measure the reliability for the entire supply chain. So once again, if you open a process, we're talking about the process, it gives you how to measure the performance of the process, of a certain process. By the way, you don't have to measure all of this. You measure what's important for you. So for example, if responsiveness is important to you, then we measure total source cycle time to completion. How long it takes from wanting the product until you receive the product. That's sourcing. Then it gives you what is the best practices. What does the best companies do? So here, sometimes they do joint service agreement. Sometimes it gives you, or they do some alliances. Note that they don't give you the details of how to do this. Note also it doesn't give you any details. It gives you just how main points to think about. It doesn't give you the entire details of how to proceed step by step. It doesn't give you a blueprint to follow. Now with the second page in the description of S2, it tells you that when you do S1, it's divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 processes in order. You need to schedule deliveries, you need to receive the product, you need to verify the product, you need to transfer product, and you need to authorize payment. That's the standard way of doing this process. and this is called elements. Schedule product here, it's called element of the process. It doesn't give you the details of how to schedule the products. You need to look for it by yourself. And it tells you for each of these one what is the expected input. To do a good schedule, you need this input. And when you finish, you need to get this output for each step. So basically, so far, it tells you what's S1, how to measure the performance of S1, what are the best practices for S1, and what are the elements of S1. And for the elements of S1, what are the expected input and output. Now, if you open page for element S1.4, as I told you before, the previous slide, that we had 5 steps. For each of these steps, we have a description for it. So here is the SCOR page for S1.4. It gives you what is the definition of transferred product. It's called transfer product. Here is the definition of transfer product. If you want to measure the performance, we have 5 different categories. If the responsiveness is what is important to you, then measure the transfer cycle time. The best practices, here are the best practices. It doesn't give you how to do it. Then in order to do this step S1.4 correctly, we need this input. And it also gives you where can we find this input. So product pull signal, it's either in manufacturing or in delivery. Product inventory location, it's in ES4. And then after you do that, S1.4, we need to get this as an output. We give some update to inventory availability, and we give this to these processes. So basically it tells you what input is needed, here is the input, and what output you should expect from this one. One important thing to take into consideration is the implementation phase. For example, here is the delivery. Okay, delivery has many elements. For example, D1.2. Here is D1.2. If you want to implement D1.2, it consists of different tasks. And then when you implement this task, it contains different small activities. SCOR doesn't cover this part. So in other words, how to actually implement this one, it gives you a guidance, what to do. But how to use it specifically, that's up to you. Now have a look at this example. Suppose that there's a software company, a laptop company that's located in Singapore. It buys raw material from Taiwan and from China. And it delivers to USA, to the warehouse in USA. And the warehouse in USA delivers to the customer. And it delivers to a warehouse in Egypt. And this warehouse or this company distributes in Egypt to the customer. This is a very small representation of a supply chain. And this company has a headquarters in USA. Now we try to find each one of them. How does each member of the supply chain do the work? So for example, they buy the plant in Singapore. They buy the product from Taiwan according to the orders. So they buy, they do sourcing activity. This is sourcing activity, and this is sourcing activity. They buy from China and they buy from Taiwan. Okay, and from Taiwan they buy to stock, and from China they buy to stock. Our branch in Taiwan, or the supplier in Taiwan, provides us the product by ordering. So if you order, they do the production. So they deliver ordered items. So D2. While in China, they are storing the product. So they deliver the stocked items. So this is D1. It's on the arc, this arc. They are doing delivery. China is doing delivery of type 1 stocked item to us, and we're buying stocked items from it. And then here we're producing two types of products. We're producing make to order and make to stock. We produce make to order items to US. So in the US they buy ordered items. So they order the computer, and then we produce the computer, or we manufacture the computer to them, or for them. While in Egypt we don't order it. They make the products, and then we buy stocked items. We buy from their stock. So basically here it's delivering. Number two, they are delivering according to ordered item. So they're delivering, not sourcing. They're delivering stocked item, not stocked item. They're delivering to order items. USA, they order the product, we manufacture the product, and we order it. So this is G2. In Egypt, they manufacture stocked items, and then they deliver stocked items here. Now, if you have a look at US, we ask US, how do you buy the products from us? They buy the product from us according to orders. So this is G2. And then what do you do in the US? They deliver to the customers according to orders. So this is G2. In Egypt here, we buy stocked items, so S1, and we deliver, they deliver stocked items. And then we sell at retailers, so D4. This is the main steps in the supply chain, in this supply chain. It's specific to the supply chain. But make sure that whenever you use S2, it means you're buying something. So USA is buying from Singapore in this one. And when you doing delivery, you're selling the product. So D means you're selling the product. And when you use D1 or D2, don't make assumptions. We need to ask the company, are you planning according to the availability of the product? Is it available? Is it made to stock? Are you producing against demand, actual demand, or are you producing against or delivering against anticipated demand? Are you making according to the forecast, or are you making according to actual orders? When it's actual orders, that means it's to order. When it's against forecast, it's to stock. Now to represent this one, we start by our suppliers. So we have here China, Taiwan, and then the company itself in Singapore, USA, our customers, Egypt. Then when you start with this one, we start with each of the triangles or the rectangles we draw in the previous slide. And for each one of these triangles, we need to have a look. What does that triangle do? For example, in China, they are doing D1. So what we're going to do here is, in China, we're going to draw a rectangle like that, an arrow like that, and put in it D1. In Taiwan, what they do in Taiwan is they're doing D2. So what we do is we go in Taiwan here and we draw an arrow and we put it in D2. Then in Singapore they're doing S1 and S2, and each one comes from different countries. So S1 here in front of China, and S2 is in front of they're doing S1 and S1. So doing S1 here and S1 here. And then you're doing make. So make here 1. And they're doing make 2. And then they do deliver 2 and deliver 1. So they do deliver 2, deliver 1, and deliver 2. In the US, they're doing S2 and D2. So in the US, they're doing S2 and D2. D2. In Egypt, they're doing S1 and D4. So in Egypt here, I will write it here like that. S1 and D. I forgot to tell you that the headquarters is in USA, and they're doing P1. They're doing planning for the manufacturing and planning for the entire supply chain. So what we need to do is we put here that's planning for the entire supply chain, that's in USA, and they're doing as well planning for the manufacturer, PM, which is P3. And then we connect each two together. So D1 here from China to Singapore in front of S1. This is D2. In Taiwan they're doing D2. In Singapore they're doing S1. And then S1 goes to M1, and this one goes to M, both of them goes to M1, M2. Here. So after S1, let's use the highlighter. Here, this one is S1, so some components here come as S1. So some products arrive here and some raw material arrive here. So when we combine both of them, so what we do here is we connect both of them, and then some will go to the manufacturer number one and some to manufacturer two. Some goes to manufacturer of stocked items and some go to the manufacturer of to order items. And then M1 goes to D1. When we manufacture something to stock, we deliver it according to stocked items. When we manufacture something to order, we deliver it according to order policy. But make sure that this is the actual practice. That's what they are actually doing. Don't assume that they are doing the correct thing. You have to follow what they do. And then D1 is delivered to S1 and D2 is delivered to D2 USA, to D2 of S2 of USA, and then this is D2 and this is F. And then the production here, plan for the production, this one here, plan for the production. This is connected as information to the manufacturing here and there. And plan the supply chain, it's connected to all the activities that in the supply chain. So we connect it to each. So basically this is the representation of the supply chain. This is not actually the end. If you're going to apply this in the real life, you need to look for the D1. What activities are you actually doing in D1? So we're doing number 1, 2, we're doing some steps here in number 1. So D1 here is represented by these activities. Then after you do that, you make sure you go back to the page of D1 in the SCOR. Here is SCOR. You find that we have here D1.1, D1.2. You do a matching. So this is, for example, is equivalent to this one, and this one is equivalent to this one, and there is D1.3. You're not using D1.3, so basically you're missing something here. So this step is missing as an important element. So it's missing something. You need to repeat this for each activity of these activities in order to find missing links. That's the detailed level. But before the detailed level, before we go into the details, we can find obvious mislinks. For example, have a look at this is D2 and this is S1. This is D2 and this is S1. In other words, he's delivering to order items. In other words, they produce the product according to the orders and then they deliver it according to the orders. While when you buy the product, your practice is you're assuming that the products are available. They are stocked. However, in the other element of the supply chain, it's not actually stocked, it's the order. So basically, we're making here an assumption that there is a mislink, broken connection. In other words, you're dealing in a way that's not compatible with the other way here, with the other one. Because you're assuming that the products are stored in large quantities, so when you do S1, you make an order for large quantities. However, they are delivering D2, they make to order and deliver to order. In other words, you don't have actually to order a lot of items. You can order smaller quantities. You can order more frequently. So we need to have a look here. What can we do to improve the performance of the supply chain when there is a mislink between different states? Here is another example of the supply chain. It's in the lecture, in the notes. You'll find it in the notes, and you'll find it in the section as well. The section will cover this. And here is an example of the supply chain of what we did, the SCOR model of what we did so far, the process mapping.